What is up, you guys? Today we are going to be talking about 5 years ago how I almost died.
Actually, though.
So it's going to be a more serious video, I guess, but also not, because we're not super serious people. So, and also don't mind our neighbor mowing the lawn next to us.
Yeah.
We're going to get right into it right now.
We decided to share the story because it's been exactly 5 years from tomorrow that Daniel went in the hospital. We were dating at the time. We've been dating for almost a year.
My whole life I've had eczema and I have asthma. If you have both of them, you know that they don't go hand in hand very well. I've had both of those and just dealt with them my whole life. They've been bad at times, but not as bad as this ever was.
Since he had really bad eczema, he ended up getting a cold sore for like the first time ever. It was like right on his mouth. You were like really sick for like a couple days, and then you kind of had these like rash type things and like blisters on your face. We thought it was just because he lived in like a really humid room. We took him out of that and like had him stay at his parents' house, and then it just like was not getting better. Me and his parents ended up taking him to the hospital.
I remember that night I was in so much pain that it literally just felt like my face was just like on fire.
So we took him to the hospital and he had just like a cold rag on it. It took him like a few hours to even get looked at. The ER doctor mentioned something called eczema herpeticum, which is when you get a cold sore and you have eczema, and then it basically combines together and spreads all over, and it's horrible. And actually that can be fatal in like childhood. So the ER doctor like briefly mentioned it and then kind of passed by it, and then they thought it was like all this other stuff. They ended up keeping him that night. He stayed in like the ICU in our little like rural hospital, so it wasn't like a huge deal that he was in ICU. Then the next day things were looking better. They kind of got him on like some steroid creams and stuff like that. So we went home. We took him back to his parents' house just to make sure, that he was good and everything. Then he wakes up the next morning and it's just worse. So it was even worse than the day before. We rushed him back to the hospital. His parents were like, "We're right behind you." So I just like drove him to the ER all by myself, got him checked in again, and we were just waiting for a lot of tests. And at this point he was like pretty out of it. I think his body was just fighting really hard. They did like some CAT scans and I think MRIs because they were just really confused. So they were like, well, we want to keep him and then just like give him some antibiotics to treat either like a viral infection or a bacterial infection. We stayed at the hospital in town for, I think it was like a week. It was like every day the doctor would come in and be like, yeah, we'll get it figured out. Like, we still don't know what it is, but we'll get there. And it's just getting worse. It's getting to the point where his eyes actually sealed shut. He couldn't open his mouth to eat anymore. It was all over his face, just like blisters that were just bleeding. His face was like literally like this big. It was awful, and I can't imagine how he was feeling. Basically, me and Daniel's family lived at the hospital for a week. We had a really great doctor about halfway through who didn't know what it was, but didn't want to just say like he didn't know. So he's like, me and my team are just researching and we're calling other doctors, and they ended up having a plastic surgeon come and look at him to see if like it was going to be something that he needed to have surgery for. And that plastic surgeon told Daniel's dad, he's like, this is really bad. You need to not be at this hospital anymore. You need to transfer him to Portland.
Which is like the biggest hospital, like good hospital.
Yeah, it's like one of the best ever. So during this week, another doctor came in and he needs to get those eyes open, and just like rips Daniel's eyes open. His body had like closed them for a reason. And Daniel was just like in so much pain. They just sealed back shut after they ripped them open. So obviously it's his body's way of just like trying to protect his eyes.
Yeah, because I said later that if that infection got into my eyes, I would be blind within like an hour for the rest of my life.
I mean, he hadn't eaten probably in like 5 days.
Yeah.
And he was on all these drugs that were making him hallucinate. Plus, he was basically blind.
I was on like morphine.
On like day 7 or so of being at the town hospital, they're like, we finally got a bed for him up in Portland. He's gonna go to the Oregon Burn Center, because that's basically what it looked like on his face, was like an insane burn, and they didn't know how to treat it. 7 days later, one morning, they're like, okay, we have a bed for him, let's go. They took him on like the stretcher and put him in the ambulance, and then I rode up in the ambulance with him. He was like pretty much unconscious the whole way out. And then once we got to the burn center, I think that this was probably just like the most traumatic time for me, because it like just instantly got so much more serious. Obviously that whole week had been awful, but we like get to the burn center. I'm like with the EMTs. Daniel's completely out of it. I can't even talk to him at this point. They're like wheeling him in. If you've ever been to the burn center, it is a very eerie place. Like it feels like you're going back to like the 70s. Everybody has like wraps around their head, and it's just very not a fun place to be. They rush him back into the ICU room, which has like tons of machines. I'm there all by myself. Daniel's family hasn't come yet at this point. They're trying to get there. The doctor comes in and he's like, this is really bad. We need to get him into surgery like right now. And I was like, okay, his family's not here yet. Like, can you wait? And he's like, we can't wait. We're gonna have to like put him under, and he's gonna be really out of it for a couple days, and he's gonna have tubes in his throat. We're not sure what we're gonna find. They basically just had to like scrape off the infection off of his face because it was so bad. There was no like coming back from it. And he's like, just so you know, we're gonna have to shave his head, and he's gonna be intubated. He's just gonna be out of it for a really long time. He might have to have skin grafts on his face. He might not ever look the same. He's like telling me this, and I have no one there with me. And Daniel's out of it. When they wheeled you away, you like barely like squeezed my hand.
I remember like getting there and then them putting me like onto this table, and then there was like a million nurses and doctors around me.
And so then we were in the waiting room for maybe like 2 or 3 hours, and I remember just like taking a nap and then waking up, and then the doctor came out and he's like, it went really well, and we didn't have to do any skin grafts at all. He's like, but basically he has like all new skin. They had to take off like the entire top layer of skin. So he's like, he looks kind of crazy because his head is like wrapped basically like a little mummy. He's like, you guys can come see him. He's still in the ICU, and just so you know, it looks kind of scary because his wrists are like handcuffed to the bed, and he's intubated, and so they like handcuff you so you don't like rip the tube out, because he was still out of it from like being on drugs and whatnot. We go in there. I honestly should not have gone in there because it was like so scary.
All I remember is wanting the tubes out because I couldn't breathe. When they did take them out, it was like so painful.
I remember just like going in for a little bit, and then I was like, I can't be in here anymore. I can't be there for him because I am like struggling. Then that night I was like, I have to go home. I think your dad stayed with you.
Yeah, that's when they took the tubes out. But I'm glad that they put those tubes in, just put feeding tubes in me, because I had like...
Yeah, the doctors were like, Town Hospital hadn't been like feeding him with like a feeding tube. We're like, no. They're like, oh my gosh. No wonder his body wasn't fighting it as well either, because he had no like nutrients to fight anything off with. So they had a feeding tube. They kept that in there for a few days. Because I remember coming back the next day, and you were like writing to us on paper, but your eyes were still sealed shut, so like was like pretty chicken scratching-y.
Scratching-y?
But it was nice that your dad was able to stay with you. And then his mom stayed with him like a couple nights. I would just come back every day and literally just sit by his bed, and we'd listen to TV because he still had his eyes closed. They would like take off the wrap on his face and like put stuff on it, and then put the wrap back on. And then eventually like started gaining your sight. It was like a little kitten.
I remember when I finally was able to open up my eyes, it was so bright. Yeah, I hadn't seen it in so long.
But at that point they had like finally nailed down like what it was.
And it was eczema herpeticum.
Yeah. Then we just stayed in the ICU for a couple days until he got his feeding tube out, and then you could like still hardly eat anything for a while just because your throat hurt so bad and you hadn't eaten anything in forever. And then we went home. 2.5 weeks after he had first been admitted to like the town hospital, he finally went home, and then he stayed with his parents for like a couple weeks.
When I was recovering in the burn center, there's people there that were in there for like months.
Yeah.
And, like they would have to have someone just like turn them in the bed. I felt very lucky and blessed that I wasn't like in a fire and didn't have to have skin grafts. People can't really stay with you if you've been there for like months on end. Like I was there for a long time, but like short enough time where like my family could be there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very grateful for the drugs that they had there, but also definitely messed with my head. Felt very like trapped. Just feel blessed to have my family there and Joe, and like just that they stuck by my side. Just so blessed. Just giving all the glory to God. I get like compliments all the time about like how good my skin looks of people that have never met me. I had this person that I was like working for, and he's like, man, you could be like a skin model. That's so crazy that like
yeah,
someone would even say that after like everything I've been through.
we had some really good doctors who like just stayed way past their shift and everything, just like figure it out. I just remember thinking like, please just like let him live. I don't even care if I get to marry him or not. I just want him to live.
And then I proposed right after because I'm like, I gotta marry this woman. She's stuck by my side. The main reason why we wanted to make this video was because being in that situation, even though I had my family and Joe around me, I felt still so trapped. We just want this channel to be a place where people can come and just have community and have a good positive outlet to like reach out. We love answering questions, comments and stuff, and just like being there in any way that we can and sharing like our testimonies. So I hope this video encouraged you in any way, shape or form. We're just very grateful for everything that God's done in our lives.
Thanks for following along, taking a peek into 5 years ago and where we are now today.
Until next video, peace.
I like to be educated.